The stage was set, and the atmosphere in the theater was electric. It was another audition day on America's Got Talent, where contestants from all walks of life came to showcase their abilities. The audience was buzzing with excitement, waiting to see the next act. Among the hopefuls backstage was 72-year-old Harold Simmons, a retired janitor from Mississippi. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he clutched a vintage harmonica, a gift from his late grandfather. Dressed in a simple suit that had seen better days, Harold looked out of place among the flashy costumes and elaborate props. He wasn't there for fame or fortune. He just wanted to share the music that had carried him through decades of hardship. As Harold stepped onto the stage, the spotlight illuminated his lined face and gray hair. The audience murmured quietly, unsure of what to expect. Some clapped politely, while others exchanged doubtful glances. But it wasn't just the audience who seemed skeptical. One of the judges, a well-known figure infamous for his harsh critiques and thinly veiled prejudices, leaned back in his chair with a smirk. This judge, often criticized for his dismissive attitude toward contestants who didn't fit his idea of star quality, whispered something to the judge next to him, prompting a chuckle. Harold, however, seemed unfazed. His eyes scanned the crowd, not with fear but with quiet determination. "Good evening," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "My name is Harold Simmons, and I'd like to share a song that means a lot to me. It's a tune my granddaddy taught me when I was a boy, and it's carried me through some tough times." The skeptical judge interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "A harmonica?" he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "That's different. Are you sure you can captivate this audience with just that?" The audience let out a collective gasp at the blunt remark. Harold paused for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then he smiled gently and nodded. "Yes, sir," he said simply. The room fell silent as Harold raised the harmonica to his lips. For a moment it felt as if time had stopped. Then the first notes emerged, soft and soulful, like a whisper from another era. The melody was rich with emotion, a blend of blues and gospel that spoke of resilience, heartache, and hope. Harold's hands moved with practiced ease, coaxing out a sound that seemed to fill every corner of the theater. The skeptical judge's smirk faltered as the music washed over him. The audience, too, began to lean forward, captivated by the raw beauty of Harold's performance. It wasn't just music. It was a story, a glimpse into a life filled with struggle and triumph. Harold closed his eyes as he played, lost in the moment, his entire being pouring into the harmonica. Each note seemed to carry a piece of his soul, reaching out to touch everyone who was listening. By the time Harold finished, the theater was silent. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, as if on cue, the audience erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, their initial doubts forgotten. Even the skeptical judge seemed taken aback, his usual smug expression replaced by a look of genuine surprise. Harold lowered the harmonica and gave a small bow, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. The elderly man's quiet confidence and breathtaking performance had done something remarkable. It had broken through prejudice, skepticism, and doubt. But little did Harold know, the most shocking part of the night was yet to come. As the thunderous applause echoed through the theater, Harold stood still on the stage, taking in the overwhelming reaction. The standing ovation was something he had never experienced before, and for a moment it seemed surreal. The skeptical judge, who had initially dismissed Harold, still looked stunned. He leaned forward, tapping his pen against the desk, as if trying to process what he had just witnessed. The other judges exchanged wide-eyed glances, clearly moved by Harold's performance. But the skeptical judge, despite his surprise, wasn't quite ready to admit defeat. "Well," he began, clearing his throat and glancing at the audience, as if searching for validation, "I'll admit that was unexpected. You're talented, no doubt about it, but I have to wonder, was this a one-off? Do you have more to offer, or is this just nostalgia playing on our emotions?" His words were met with a murmur of disapproval from the audience. Harold, however, didn't flinch. He took a deep breath, his hand still resting on the harmonica. "Sir," he said calmly, "I've got a lifetime of music in me. This harmonica has been my voice when I didn't have one. It's carried stories, my family's stories, and I've got plenty more to share if you'll let me." The skeptical judge opened his mouth to respond, but one of the other judges cut him off. I think what we all want to say, Harold, she said, her voice warm and genuine, is that you've touched our hearts tonight. Your music isn't just a performance, it's an experience. You've shown us something real, and that's rare. The audience erupted into cheers, clearly in agreement. As the applause died down, the host of the show stepped onto the stage, microphone in hand. Harold, I think it's safe to say you've won everyone over tonight, he said with a grin. But I have to ask, what inspired you to audition? What made you decide to share your music with the world? Harold hesitated, his gaze drifting to the harmonica in his hands. It wasn't an easy decision, he admitted. I've spent most of my life in the shadows, just trying to get by. But a few months ago, my granddaughter, she's 10, she said to me, Grandpa, the world needs to hear you. They need to know your music. And you know, when a little girl looks up at you with that kind of faith, you don't want to let her down. So here I am. The audience let out a collective awe, touched by Harold's story. Even the skeptical judge seemed momentarily disarmed, his expression softening. But true to his nature, he quickly recovered. That's a sweet story, he said, his tone measured. But this is a competition, Harold. Sweet stories don't win. Talent does. You'll need to prove you've got what it takes to keep up with the other contestants. Harold met the judge's gaze, his expression unwavering. I understand that, sir, he said, and I'm ready. I didn't come here for sympathy. I came here to share my music. If that's not enough, I'll accept it. But I won't stop playing no matter what. The audience erupted into applause again, impressed by Harold's quiet determination. The other judges nodded in approval, clearly rooting for him. The skeptical judge, however, remained reserved, his expression unreadable. Harold walked off the stage to a wave of cheers, his heart full but his mind focused. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. What he didn't know was that his journey was about to take an even more unexpected turn, one that would leave everyone, including the skeptical judge, completely speechless. Backstage, Harold was greeted with enthusiastic applause from the other contestants and crew members. Some shook his hand, others patted him on the back, and a few even had tears in their eyes. Despite the overwhelming support, Harold remained humble. He smiled and nodded at the kind words but quickly retreated to a quiet corner with his harmonica. This wasn't about fame or praise for him. It was about staying true to his music in the stories it told. As Harold prepared for the next round of the competition, word about his performance began to spread. Clips of his audition started circulating on social media, where millions of viewers watched the elderly man's soulful harmonica performance. Comments poured in, with people sharing how deeply his music had moved them. This man is living proof that talent and passion have no age limit, one viewer wrote. Another said, Harold's music speaks to the soul. I don't even like harmonica, but I couldn't stop crying. But while Harold's growing popularity brought him an outpouring of support, not everyone was impressed. The skeptical judge, now aware of the buzz Harold was generating, seemed determined to challenge him in the next round. During an off-camera interview, the judge remarked, Sure, Harold had a great audition, but let's not get carried away. This is a national stage, not a retirement home. Let's see if he can really bring something fresh in the next round. His comments sparked outrage among fans online, many of whom accused him of ageism and racism. Harold, however, remained unaware of the controversy brewing outside. His focus was solely on preparing for his next performance. This time, he decided to do something even more personal. He chose a song that his mother used to sing while working long hours in the cotton fields. It was a song of resilience and hope, one that had carried his family through generations of struggle. Harold spent hours practicing, carefully adapting the melody to his harmonica while ensuring it retained its emotional weight. The day of the second performance arrived, and Harold stepped onto the stage once again. This time, the audience greeted him with loud cheers, their admiration for the elderly musician evident. Harold stood in the center of the stage, his harmonica in hand, and took a deep breath. Tonight, he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion, I'm playing a piece of my family's history. It's not just a song, it's a story of survival, strength, and faith. I hope it touches your hearts the way it's touched mine. As Harold began to play, the theater fell silent. The notes were hauntingly beautiful, carrying a weight of emotion that seemed almost tangible. The melody ebbed and flowed, painting vivid pictures of hardship and perseverance. The audience sat spellbound, some with tears streaming down their faces. Even the skeptical judge, who had been ready to dismiss Harold once again, found himself leaning forward in his seat, captivated by the raw power of the performance. By the time Harold finished, the room erupted into a standing ovation. People cheered and clapped, their admiration for the elderly musician evident. The other judges couldn't hold back their praise, each taking turns to commend Harold for his authenticity and talent. When it was the skeptical judge's turn to speak, he hesitated. For the first time, he seemed genuinely at a loss for words. Finally, he said, "I'll admit, Harold, I underestimated you. That performance was extraordinary. You've proven me wrong tonight." The audience cheered even louder at the judge's rare admission. Harold smiled humbly and nodded. "Thank you, sir," he said. But deep down, he knew his journey wasn't just about proving others wrong. It was about staying true to himself and his music. Little did Harold know, the best and most surprising part of his journey was yet to come. After his second performance, Harold's name became a household topic. News outlets, social media, and blogs lit up with discussions about the elderly musician with the harmonica who had managed to touch so many hearts. People from all over the world shared his story, marveling at his resilience, talent, and the sheer emotion he poured into his music. Fans dubbed him the soul of the harmonica, and it wasn't just his performances that resonated with them. It was his authenticity and the way he carried himself with grace, even in the face of skepticism and doubt. But while Harold was winning over audiences, the skeptical judge still seemed unconvinced. Though he had admitted Harold's second performance was extraordinary, there was a lingering sense that he wasn't ready to fully embrace the elderly musician's success. "The finals are where real stars are made," the judge said during an off-camera segment. "Harold's great, but I still don't see him as a winner. This isn't a charity show. It's a talent competition." These remarks once again sparked heated debates online. Fans came to Harold's defense, calling out the judge for his stubbornness and lack of appreciation for Harold's unique artistry. Many argued that Harold's talent went beyond technical skill. It was his ability to connect with people on an emotional level that set him apart. Meanwhile, Harold remained blissfully unaware of the ongoing drama. He wasn't concerned about winning or losing. His only focus was on delivering another heartfelt performance. For the next round, Harold decided to take a bold step. Instead of playing a well-known tune or another family melody, he composed an original piece. The inspiration came to him late one night while he was sitting by his small apartment window, watching the rain fall. He thought about his life, the struggles, the losses, the joys, and how his harmonica had been his constant companion through it all. The piece he wrote wasn't just music, it was a reflection of his entire journey. When the night of the performance arrived, the anticipation in the theater was palpable. The audience had grown to adore Harold, and there was an air of excitement mixed with nervousness as he walked onto the stage. Harold stood silently for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces. "Tonight," he said softly, "I want to share a part of myself with you. This is a piece I wrote about life, about its highs and lows, its beauty and its pain. I hope it speaks to you the way it spoke to me when I wrote it." The first notes of Harold's original composition were slow and deliberate, almost like a quiet conversation. As the melody unfolded, it grew in complexity and intensity, capturing the essence of every emotion he had ever felt. The music was both heartbreaking and uplifting, a delicate balance that left the audience completely spellbound. It was as if Harold's harmonica was speaking directly to their souls, telling a story that was uniquely his but also universally relatable. Even the skeptical judge, who had been watching with his usual critical eye, couldn't hide his reaction. His arms, which were typically crossed in judgment, were now resting on the desk, his expression a mixture of awe and reflection. It was clear that Harold's music had struck a chord with him in a way he hadn't expected. As the final note faded into silence, there was a brief moment where time seemed to stand still. Then the theater erupted into a roar of applause and cheers, louder than ever before. Harold stood on stage, his hands trembling slightly as he bowed, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and appreciation. But as he looked out into the crowd, he noticed something he hadn't expected, a tear glistening in the eye of the skeptical judge. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. For the first time, Harold felt that perhaps he had done more than entertain. He had changed a heart. However, he couldn't have guessed what the skeptical judge would do next, a decision that would shock everyone and change the course of Harold's journey forever. As the applause finally began to die down, Harold stood on the stage, visibly moved by the overwhelming response. For a moment, he allowed himself to soak it all in, the cheers, the standing ovation, and the sheer energy of a crowd that had embraced him wholeheartedly. It was a moment he had never imagined in his wildest dreams. But then, the unexpected happened. The skeptical judge, who had remained the most resistant to Harold's charm throughout the competition, slowly stood up from his chair. The theater fell silent as everyone turned their attention to him. He cleared his throat, visibly emotional, and raised his microphone. "Harold," he began, his voice unusually soft and measured, "I've been sitting here for weeks holding on to my doubts, thinking that you didn't belong here, that you couldn't compete with the younger, flashier talents. But tonight, you proved me wrong." The crowd erupted into cheers at the judge's admission, but he held up his hand to quiet them. "I've seen a lot of performers come and go," he continued, "but what you've brought to this stage is something I don't see often. You've reminded me, and all of us, why music matters. It's not just about skill or perfection. It's about connection, about telling stories that touch people's hearts. And Harold, your music has done that. You've touched my heart." Harold stood there stunned. For weeks he had accepted the skeptical judge's critiques with quiet dignity, never expecting to change his mind. But now, hearing those words, he felt a deep sense of validation. Not because he had won the judge over, but because he had stayed true to himself and his music. The judge wasn't finished. "But," he said, with a sly smile that sent ripples of curiosity through the crowd, "I think we're all wondering, what's next for Harold? Because I have an idea." The audience murmured in confusion as the judge stepped down from his seat and walked onto the stage. Standing beside Harold, he turned to face the crowd. "Harold," he said, "I've been in this industry a long time, and I know talent when I see it. I know I've been your harshest critic, but tonight I want to offer you something. I want to help you record your own album. Your music deserves to be heard by the world, not just on this stage, but everywhere." The theater erupted into gasps and cheers. Harold's eyes widened in disbelief. He had come to the competition simply to share his music, never imagining it would lead to an opportunity like this. He looked at the judge, his hands trembling slightly as he held the harmonica. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Completely serious," the judge replied, his tone firm. "You've got something special, Harold, and the world needs to hear it. Let's make it happen." The other judges quickly chimed in, offering their enthusiastic support for the idea. The host stepped forward, grinning from ear to ear. "Well, folks," he said, addressing the audience, "I think we can all agree that Harold has not only won our hearts, but also opened a new chapter in his incredible journey. And I, for one, can't wait to see where it takes him." As Harold left the stage that night, the theater still buzzing with excitement, he felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, disbelief, and an overwhelming sense of purpose. He had come to the competition as a quiet, unassuming man with a harmonica, but he was leaving as a symbol of resilience and the transformative power of music. And as for the skeptical judge, he had learned a valuable lesson too, that sometimes the most extraordinary talent comes from the most unexpected places. Harold's journey was far from over, but one thing was clear. He had already made an indelible mark on the world, and his story was just beginning.